International, and particularly Dr. Nelson Watting, for really helping everyone to bring this event together. So what is freedom of speech? I mean, look, it's a subject that gets talked about all the time, but everyone who talks about it tends to have a different opinion on it. In New Zealand, a lot of the times, what people call freedom of speech is actually freedom from consequences that follow on from speech. And people expect that they will be able to say something and they have the freedom to do that, which they can, but then no one else has the freedom to speak back to it. So that's one of the ways that we kind of misunderstand freedom of speech. But the panel today is going to look at this in very different ways. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce Cheryl Pearl Suchet. You're going to pick a writer from your region and read the contextual.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. I was going to stand, but I think it's better to sit. You want me to stand? I'm so short. How's that better? It's not that much different. When I was first asked to participate in this panel, I said, wow, I have to represent all of the Americas. That's a lot of responsibility. And my initial thought was to talk about the writers that I know best, which are the American writers who were blacklisted during the McCarthy era of the 1950s. And they include the venerable Arthur Miller, Ray Bradbury, Dalton Trumbo, and Walter Bernstein, all of whom were forced to submit work under pseudonyms or go completely underground if they refused to name names during the House Un-American Activities Committee chaired by the infamous Senator Joe McCarthy in the 1950s. One of the people who did name names was the director Elia Kazan, who was given an honorary Academy Award in 2008. I mean, he's a wonderful director, but that award was protested by the survivors of the blacklist. I would like to draw your attention to a photographic essay online in the Hollywood Reporter of 7 of those living survivors who are all in their 90s. And they remain stalwart exponents of freedom of expression in art and in life. And their triumph over the tyranny of fear, which is an expression you hear a lot in America, is an example to every writer who continues to work. In the end, I think that so much of the present problems of censorship occur in Latin America, and I have a good friend in New York who I work with, who is an Uruguayan bookseller and writer and publisher named Javier Molea. And he told me, oh, you should talk about Eduardo Galeano or Mario Benedetti, who are both Uruguayan writers who were subject to persecution, imprisonment, and exile during the junta of their country. So I decided I would talk about Eduardo Galeano, who has a new book out called The Calendar of Days, because that book and his work is the essence of what this panel and this festival represents, which is the enduring power of the book, the library, and the word as symbols of freedom of thought, expression, and rebellion. But before I read from Galeano, I would be remiss not to talk about the censorship of the knife, which is occurring in America's nearest southern neighbor, Mexico, which has become one of the most dangerous places on the planet to be a journalist. Since December 2006, when Mexican President Felipe Calderón began his military campaign against the drug cartels, 35 writers have been murdered, 33 print journalists, 1 author, and 1 poet, while a further 8 print journalists have gone missing. Others have been threatened, harassed, driven into exile, or otherwise censored. Many of these increasingly gruesome crimes occur in regions where organized crime has a stronghold. However, this persecution would not be possible without the collusion of officials and the inability of the justice system to bring assassins to trial. And I'll just name a few of the murdered. One is Susana Chavez Castillo, a prominent poet and activist who led protests against the unsolved killings of women raped and killed in Ciudad Juarez. The reporters Ana Maria Marcela Yarce Viveros and Rocio Gonzalez Trapaga, who were abducted in Mexico City, and their bodies were found the next day. And political journalist Angel Castillo Corona, who was murdered along with his 16-year-old son in Oquilan, Mexico State,